poor farmer inspects his land after a violent storm and finds something buried that should not exist. What scientists uncover beneath his field will shock the world. Stay with us until the end and tell us in the comments which country you're watching from. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss what happens next. The storm had not come gently. It arrived in the middle of the night like an accusation, tearing through Harper County with sheets of cold rain and violent wind that rattled the old farmhouse to its bones. Thunder rolled low and heavy, as if something massive was moving beneath the sky itself. Michael Harper barely slept. Each crack of thunder felt personal, as though the land he loved was being judged and found wanting. By dawn, the storm had passed, leaving behind a silence that felt almost unnatural. The air was cool and damp, carrying the sharp smell of wet soil and broken plants. Michael stood on the front porch with a chipped mug of lukewarm coffee in his hand, staring out over his fields. What he saw tightened something deep in his chest. Corn stalks lay bent and broken, pressed into the mud like casualties after a lost battle. Fences leaned at awkward angles, some posts completely torn from the ground. The land glistened under the pale morning sun, every puddle reflecting the sky like a quiet apology from nature itself. Michael exhaled slowly, his breath visible in the cool air. 2 weeks earlier, the bank's final notice had arrived. One more missed payment, and the farm would be gone. The same land his father had worked, the same soil his grandfather had bled into. Michael took another sip of coffee, then set the mug down and pulled on his boots. Worry would not fix broken fences. He crossed the yard, boots sinking into thick mud with each step. The storm had carved uneven paths through the field, channels of brown water leading toward the dry creek bed at the far edge of the property. Summers had reduced it to little more than a scar in the land, a shallow trench where water once flowed freely. Now, after the storm, a thin stream crawled through it again, sluggish and dark. Michael walked slowly, scanning the ground for damage. Every fallen post, every washed-out section of earth meant time. Time he did not have. When he reached the creek, he stopped. Something was wrong. The bank of the creek had collapsed in one section, soil peeled back like torn skin. Beneath it, something dark and curved protruded from the mud. Sunlight struck its surface and reflected back in a dull, unnatural sheen. Michael frowned and stepped closer. At first, he thought it was metal. Old farms had a way of swallowing machinery over decades. Rusted plow blades, forgotten parts, even whole engines sometimes resurfaced after heavy rain. But this was different. He crouched down, one knee sinking into the mud, and brushed away dirt with his gloved hand. The surface beneath was smooth. Too smooth. It wasn't rusted, and it wasn't stone either. It had a texture somewhere in between, hard and dense, marked with faint ridges that ran in deliberate patterns. Michael's heartbeat quickened. The object was cold to the touch, yet as his fingers traced the curved surface, a strange sensation crawled up his arm. Not pain, not fear exactly, more like awareness, as if he were touching something that remembered being alive. He brushed away more mud. The exposed section grew larger, revealing a massive arc that disappeared back into the earth. It wasn't flat like a slab or jagged like broken machinery. It was rounded, thick, layered, armor-like. "It looks like a shell," he muttered to himself. But no shell he had ever seen. This was enormous, far larger than any turtle, tortoise, or animal he could imagine belonging in these fields. The shape suggested protection, strength, survival. Michael swallowed hard and wiped sweat from his forehead despite the cool air. A chill crept through him that had nothing to do with the weather. Fossils existed. He knew that. He'd seen documentaries, museum displays, stories of bones found in deserts and cliffs. But those things belonged to experts, to museums, to places far from a struggling farm in the Midwest. They did not belong to him. And yet here it was. Hope flickered before fear could stop it. What if this was valuable? What if this was the miracle he and Amanda had been praying for without ever daring to say the words out loud? The thought felt dangerous. He glanced around instinctively, scanning the empty fields, the distant tree line, the dirt road that cut past the farm. No one was in sight. The nearest neighbor was more than a mile away. Still, unease settled in his stomach. Michael stood abruptly and jogged back toward the barn. Minutes later, he returned with a shovel and an old tarp, his movements hurried and tense. He didn't dig. Not yet. Instead, he carefully covered the exposed surface, pulling the tarp tight and weighting it down with stones, as if hiding it might somehow protect it. Or protect him. When he went back inside, mud streaked the kitchen floor. Amanda turned from the stove, concern immediately creasing her tired face. She wore her robe, hair tied back, eyes shadowed by weeks of worry. "What happened?" she asked. "You look like you've seen something you shouldn't have." Michael opened his mouth, then closed it again. He took a breath. "I found something by the creek," he said slowly. "Something big." Amanda listened as he described it. The shape, the texture, the size. With every word, disbelief gave way to something quieter and more dangerous. "Are you sure it's not just old equipment?" she asked carefully. "I've dug up junk my whole life," Michael replied. "This isn't junk." Before Amanda could respond, the back door burst open and Chris rushed in, energy filling the room like a spark. 12 years old and unstoppable. "What's not junk?" he asked, already reaching for a slice of toast. Michael hesitated only a moment. "Come with me," he said. They walked back across the field together. Chris nearly slipped twice, laughing, until Michael pulled back the tarp. The laughter died instantly. Chris dropped to his knees, eyes wide, fingers brushing the dark surface with reverence. "Whoa," he whispered. "Dad, what is this?" "I don't know," Michael said. "But it's important." Amanda stayed a step back, arms folded tightly. Something about the object made her uneasy. It felt old, heavy, like it carried the weight of time itself. As they stood there, the morning quiet returned. Birds chirped, water trickled faintly through the creek. Yet Michael felt a warning pulse in his chest. This discovery could save them, or it could ruin them. He didn't notice the slight movement among the trees near the orchard. He didn't see the parked truck partially hidden by branches or the figure watching through binoculars. Inside the truck, a man lowered the lenses and reached for his phone. "Yeah," he said quietly when the line connected. "You were right. The farmer found something." As Michael Harper led his family back toward the house, hope pressed harder against his ribs than fear. He glanced once over his shoulder at the covered mound of earth, unaware that the storm had uncovered far more than a relic. It had awakened a conflict that would change everything. By the next morning, the quiet certainty Michael had felt after covering the strange object was already beginning to erode. He sensed it before he could explain it, the way a farmer senses an approaching drought long before the soil cracks. The air itself felt different, heavier, as if the land knew something had been disturbed and was waiting for the consequences. Michael tried to follow his usual routine. He fed the livestock, repaired what he could of the damaged fence, and stacked fallen boards near the barn. His hands moved automatically, driven by habit, but his thoughts never strayed far from the creek. Every few minutes, his gaze drifted toward the tarp-covered mound in the distance, half expecting it to move, to breathe, to reveal that it was never meant to be uncovered. Chris begged him to go back and look at it again. "Just for a minute," the boy pleaded, eyes bright with wonder. What if it's a dinosaur? Michael forced a smile. We wait, he said, until we know what we're dealing with. Amanda supported him, though worry sat heavily in her expression. She spent the morning on the phone, calling numbers she found online: museums, universities, anyone who might know something about fossils or ancient remains. Most calls ended the same way: polite disbelief, rushed dismissals, promises to look into it that sounded like nothing at all. By noon, frustration hung thick in the house. The knock at the door came without warning. Michael froze. Visitors were rare, especially unannounced ones. He wiped his hands on his jeans and walked to the door, a familiar tightness forming in his chest. When he opened it, a man stood on the porch who did not belong there. He was tall, well-dressed, his suit immaculate, despite the mud and dust of the countryside. His silver hair was slicked back perfectly, and his polished shoes looked untouched by the gravel driveway. He smiled with practiced ease. Michael Harper, the man said, extending his hand. A pleasure. My name is Jonathan Grayson. Michael did not take the hand. Can I help you? He asked instead. Grayson lowered his hand smoothly, unfazed. I believe you can. I hear you've made a rather unusual discovery on your property. Michael's stomach dropped. I don't know what you're talking about, he said. Grayson chuckled softly, as if indulging a child. In small communities, information travels quickly, especially when it concerns something rare, valuable. His gaze flicked briefly past Michael, toward the fields, and from what I understand, this find could change your circumstances significantly. Michael stepped forward, subtly blocking the doorway. This is private property, he said. You should leave. Grayson's smile did not fade. Of course, I wouldn't dream of intruding. I simply wanted to make an offer. One that might relieve you of certain pressures. He paused. The bank, for instance. Michael's jaw tightened. Grayson reached into his jacket and pulled out a sleek business card, placing it carefully on the porch rail. I collect antiquities, he continued calmly. And I fund private research. If what you've found is what I suspect, I'd be willing to offer you a sum that would eliminate your debts entirely. No more worrying about missed payments. No more fear of losing this land. Amanda appeared behind Michael, her face pale. We're not selling anything, Michael said flatly. Grayson sighed, as though disappointed, but not surprised. You're making an emotional decision about something you don't yet understand. Objects like this are delicate, dangerous if mishandled. Surely you'd prefer it be studied by professionals rather than left buried in the mud. Michael met his gaze, anger flaring. We'll decide what happens on our land. Grayson straightened his jacket. Think carefully, Mr. Harper. Opportunities like this don't come twice. His eyes hardened slightly. And refusing help can have consequences. He turned and walked back to his black Cadillac, which waited at the end of the drive like a patient predator. Dust rose behind it as it disappeared down the road. Michael stared at the business card long after the car was gone. He knows about the loans, Amanda whispered. I know, Michael replied, which means he knows more than he should. That evening, unease settled over the farm like fog. As they ate dinner, the low rumble of an engine slowed near the house. Michael rose instantly and looked out the window. A pickup truck sat on the roadside, headlights off, engine idling. Don't move, he whispered. He stepped outside, heart pounding, shotgun already in his hands. The truck remained still for several long seconds. Then the headlights flicked on, and it sped away into the darkness. They're watching us, Michael said when he came back inside. Amanda's voice trembled. We should call the sheriff. Michael let out a bitter laugh. Sheriff Doyle plays golf with Grayson every Sunday. That night, Michael didn't sleep. He sat in the armchair by the window, shotgun across his lap, eyes fixed on the dark outline of the barn. Every rustle of leaves, every distant sound sent a jolt through his body. Sometime after midnight, he heard footsteps near the fence line. "Hey!" he shouted, raising the gun. A shadow bolted toward the orchard, fast and silent. Michael chased only a few steps before stopping, chest burning. Whoever it was, they weren't curious teenagers. They were deliberate. The next morning, Michael made a decision. If this discovery was real, he needed people who couldn't be bought. He dialed a number Amanda had found for a paleontology department at a state university. His voice shook at first, then steadied as he described what he'd found. Skepticism turned into curiosity, then into promise. They would send someone. As he hung up, hope flickered again, but this time it was tempered by fear. Across town, in an office lined with marble and glass, Jonathan Grayson swirled a glass of whiskey and smiled as one of his men reported the farmer's call. "Don't worry," Grayson murmured. "They always come around." Michael Harper stood by the window, unaware that his refusal had already set something in motion, something far bigger than a single discovery buried in the mud. The days that followed blurred into a relentless sequence of tension and exhaustion. Michael felt as if he were living inside a tightening vice, each turn bringing more pressure, less air. The discovery at the creek was no longer just a secret or a possibility. It had become a threat, one that crept into every corner of their lives. Dr. Rogers called daily with updates. Each conversation followed the same pattern: cautious optimism, followed by frustration. Permits that should have taken days were delayed without explanation. New forms appeared out of nowhere. Requirements changed overnight. What should have been a straightforward academic process turned into a maze designed to wear them down. "They're interfering," Emily admitted during one call, her professional calm strained. "Someone at the county level is slowing everything." Michael didn't need her to say the name. Grayson returned 3 days later. This time he didn't knock. Michael was repairing a section of fencing near the barn when the low growl of an engine rolled across the field. The black Cadillac eased up the driveway, tires crunching over gravel. Grayson stepped out, immaculate as ever, sunglasses hiding his eyes. "You're persistent," Grayson said mildly. "I respect that." Michael didn't stop working. "Say what you came to say." Grayson's smile thinned. "I came to save you from yourself. The state will take that land from under your feet the moment they realize what's there. You won't see a dime. I'm your only chance to walk away with something." "It's my land," Michael replied, finally straightening. "And what's buried there doesn't belong to you." Grayson leaned closer, lowering his voice. "Everything belongs to someone eventually." He left without another word. That night, the wind rose again. Not a storm this time, just a restless current that rattled loose boards and carried the smell of dry grass. Michael lay awake, staring at the ceiling, counting every creak of the house. Just before dawn, Chris's scream shattered the silence. "Dad, the barn!" Michael bolted upright and ran barefoot into the yard. Flames tore through the barn's wooden walls, roaring upward with terrifying speed. Smoke billowed into the sky, thick and black. The heat hit him like a wall. "No, no, no," he muttered, sprinting forward. He grabbed the hose and twisted the valve. Nothing. No water. Panic surged. He ran to the corral, fumbling with latches as terrified animals pushed and kicked, desperate to escape. Horses burst free, eyes wild. Cows bellowed in fear. Through the smoke, Michael saw a calf frozen near the doorway, trapped by fire. Without thinking, he ran back inside. The heat was unbearable. Smoke burned his lungs. He scooped the calf into his arms and staggered out, collapsing into the wet grass just as part of the roof caved in behind him. Amanda reached him, coughing, tears streaking her face. By the time the volunteer fire department arrived, it was too late. The barn collapsed into itself, flames consuming years of work in minutes. Sheriff Doyle arrived last. He surveyed the ruins with practiced concern. "Looks like an accident," he said. "Old wiring, maybe." Michael stared at him, soot covering his face. The water was cut. Doyle's eyes flicked away for half a second. These things happen. They both knew the truth. As the smoke cleared, Emily arrived, her expression dark. She followed Michael to the creek, where fresh tire tracks scarred the mud. Stakes had been driven into the ground nearby. "They tried to dig," she said quietly. "The fire was a distraction." Amanda's voice shook. "What do they want from us? To destroy everything?" Emily looked at Michael, resolve hardening in her eyes. "They're scared. That means you're doing something right." But the attacks didn't stop there. 2 days later, an article appeared in the local paper. It questioned the legitimacy of the discovery, hinted that Michael might be fabricating evidence for financial gain. Social media followed quickly. Comments ranged from mocking to vicious. Amanda stopped reading after the first few messages. Chris pretended not to notice, but Michael saw the way his son grew quieter. Then came the knock at the door. Sheriff Doyle stood outside, Chris seated in the back of the cruiser. "What is this?" Michael demanded, fear clawing up his spine. "Your boy was found trespassing on Grayson mining property," Doyle said coolly. "With a tool, attempted theft of mineral resources." "That's a lie," Michael shouted. Doyle leaned closer, voice dropping. "Mr. Grayson is being generous by not pressing charges, but generosity has limits." Amanda pulled Chris into her arms as the cruiser drove away. The boy was shaking, tears soaking her shoulder. That night, Michael sat alone at the creek, fist pressed into the dirt above the buried shell. "They're trying to break us," he whispered. But something hardened inside him. The next morning, a convoy of vehicles appeared on the road. University trucks, equipment, people. Emily had done it. As scientists and reporters stepped onto the field, Michael felt something he hadn't felt in weeks. Momentum. The fight was no longer his alone. As cameras began to roll and the first tools touched the earth, Michael knew one thing with certainty. Grayson had crossed a line, and there was no going back. The farm no longer felt like a place forgotten by the world. By midday, the narrow dirt road leading to the Harper's property was lined with vehicles. University trucks stood beside satellite vans. Reporters adjusted microphones, camera operators scanned the fields for the best angles, and scientists moved with controlled urgency, careful not to step where the ground had been marked. The quiet isolation Michael had lived in for years was gone, replaced by a low, constant hum of voices, engines, and expectation. Michael stood near the creek, arms crossed, watching as Dr. Emily Rogers directed her team. Bright flags marked the excavation grid. Tools were laid out with precision. This was no longer a secret buried in mud. It was a site of global interest. Chris hovered nearby, eyes wide, absorbing everything. Amanda stood beside Michael, her hand gripping his sleeve as if grounding herself in the moment. After fire, lies, and threats, seeing professionals take control felt surreal. The first layer of soil was removed slowly, deliberately. Shovels gave way to brushes. Every movement was measured. As dirt fell away, more of the dark, curved surface emerged, stretching far beyond what anyone had initially imagined. A hush spread across the crowd. The shell continued outward, massive and intact, its overlapping plates forming a structure built for survival in a world long gone. Emily knelt beside it, running a gloved hand along the exposed surface, her breath catching. "This is extraordinary," she murmured. "This isn't just large, this is unprecedented." Minutes later, a student let out a sharp gasp. A rib thick, perfectly aligned, emerged beneath the shell. There was no doubt now. A nearly complete skeleton lay beneath the Harper farm. Cheers erupted from the excavation team. Reporters surged forward, shouting questions. Emily turned to Michael, her face lit with awe. "This will change everything," she said. "This creature rewrites what we know about prehistoric North America." Michael felt his throat tighten. For a moment, he couldn't speak. All he could do was look at the ancient giant emerging from the earth and feel the weight of what had chosen his land, his life, to be revealed. Then the air changed. A familiar voice cut through the celebration. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" Jonathan Grayson stood at the edge of the field, flanked by Sheriff Doyle and 2 deputies. His expression was cold, controlled, but his eyes burned with fury. Cameras immediately swung toward him. Emily stepped forward, placing herself between Grayson and the excavation. "This is a protected scientific site," she said sharply. "You have no authority here." Grayson smiled thinly. "That's debatable." He nodded toward Doyle. "This land is under legal dispute. Until that's resolved, all activity stops." Michael moved forward, fists clenched. "You burned my barn. You threatened my family. You tried to steal this." Doyle shifted, hand resting near his holster. "Stand back, Harper." Grayson pulled an envelope from his jacket and extended it toward Michael. "One last offer," he said calmly. "Take it, and this ends." Michael didn't reach for it. Instead, he turned toward the cameras. "This man tried to buy silence," he said loudly, his voice shaking but strong. "When I refused, he burned my barn. He framed my son. He used power to steal what doesn't belong to him." Reporters erupted with questions. Cameras zoomed in on Grayson's face as his composure cracked for the first time. Emily's phone rang. She answered, listened, then raised her voice. "The Department of Natural Resources has issued an emergency protective order," she announced. "This site is now under federal protection. Any interference is illegal." Cheers broke out. Doyle froze. Grayson's smile vanished. For a long moment, he stared at Michael, hatred unmasked. Then he turned sharply and walked away, retreating under the unblinking eye of the cameras. The battle was over. In the weeks that followed, everything changed. The site was officially designated a protected research area. Funding arrived to rebuild the barn. Investigations opened into Grayson's operations. Sheriff Doyle quietly disappeared from public view. The Harper farm became a center of learning, not exploitation. Chris was named an honorary junior curator. Amanda helped organize educational programs. Michael watched the land with pride instead of fear. One evening, as the sun dipped low, Chris knelt near the marked grid, brushing soil away from a faint glimmer beneath the surface. "Dad," he said softly. "What if there's more?" Michael knelt beside him, pressing his palm to the earth. "There always is," he replied. The giant beneath the soil rested peacefully, its story finally told. But the land still whispered of secrets waiting to be uncovered. This wasn't the end. It was only the beginning. This discovery didn't just change one farmer's life, it changed history. But what if this wasn't the only secret hidden beneath the ground? Share your thoughts in the comments and tell us what you think lies deeper. Subscribe to the channel, hit the bell, and watch the next shocking story right now.